I would now like to welcome the members of the press, as well as my panel for today's press conference. We are lucky to have over 60 media represented and attending today's event. And as always, thank you for your time and support. Obviously, we wish we could be in our normal setting in Nairobi at the Radisson, but unfortunately, this will do for now. But thank you for your continued support. You obviously play a vital role in driving the message for real estate in East Africa forward and in Kenya. So I would like to now move to introducing my panel, which some of them have already spoken today. So I'll welcome Gerard Zili from Nedbank CIB, Ben Woodhams from Knight Frank Kenya, as well as Dennis Kwanzaa from IFCH. I'll wait for them to join on. We'll start by asking one question each to the panel and then looking at or taking questions from the media. So please submit your questions on the live chat function. If you've got any questions or want to make comments, please do so. Then I'll also relay these to the panelists. So I'd like to welcome my panel now. If they can switch on their audio and video. And then if there's any interview requests from the press conference going forward, please be in direct contact with either African Laughter or Murray Anderson from the API events team. Hi, Ben, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, yes.
Okay, apologies. I'm not sure where the other panelists are. Okay, so I think let's get started. And then we'll, once they join, we can have them join the panel. So I've done the introduction and obviously welcome the media. So let me go into a direct question to yourself, and then we can see what other questions come through. So in terms of, obviously, Knight Frank has also just released a report, which you mentioned in your presentation, that looks at the half-year performance up to date in Kenya. So I think maybe just harboring on some of the things that we've discussed. What trends, or let's say, what trends did you see that happened pre-COVID-19? What trends do you think are now going to be accelerated, whether it's investment into logistics, warehousing? You made comments to also your viewpoints on where the flexible workspace sector is going to be, current where it was going and where you think it's going to go. So maybe just highlighting your viewpoints on the trends that you think are going to be accelerated in light of what's happened from the pandemic.
Yeah, okay, fine. I think obviously, as you said, logistics and warehousing is definitely a sector that will be one of the quicker ones to bounce back. But I don't think that COVID-19 is really providing an opportunity for any of the property sectors to reset, really. One of the questions was, will a slowdown in development ultimately result in the much needed supply and demand equilibrium? I don't think so, no. I think if anything, the COVID situation has exacerbated the demand and supply mismatch, and so it'll take even longer to recover. But in terms of the market generally, we've had lengthy discussions. I hope the journalists were able to attend the panel discussions that we had about what the recovery will look like across the East African property market. But the general consensus is that it's a long way until we're out of the woods. We've got effectively a two-stage recovery to get through. The first stage is getting over the virus itself and getting people back to work, getting people back in shopping centres. And the second stage is getting over the economic shock of the virus, the lockdown, the economic damage, and that could take years. And that story is not unique to East Africa. It's a global story. But in terms of which sectors will recover quickest, well, we discussed this in the various panels we've had today, and I think probably logistics will be one of the quickest sectors. Data centers haven't even really an impact. If anything, they've grown because data centers are not sensitive to the movement of people, and obviously more data being consumed as people are working from home and changing their working practices. Other end of the spectrum, you've got hotels, the hospitality sector, and retail, which obviously, for reasons we've discussed, will take some time to recover.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And welcome, Gerard. Welcome, Dennis. Thank you for joining. Maybe I'll just go from that point on to Gerard. From your perspective, I know we've obviously had a panel. Some of these things were touched on, but from a project financing perspective, do you see a slowdown in new developments? Do you foresee, or how long will that slow down? Do you foresee that slowdown? And yeah, obviously it's tough to tell now, but when do you think when do you think there will be a bounce back, and where people are ready to deploy capital, developers are ready to get back in terms of pushing projects forward, from what you see vantage point?
Again, very difficult to say, and I want to sort of latch onto something that Ben said around this two-stage, and I think during the panel discussion, I mentioned it as well. The big unknown factor at the moment is not so much COVID and will it end? It will end, and it might even end through a vaccine becoming available as early as end of the year or beginning of next year. In the absence of a vaccine, I don't know what people's behavior would be like. So even as the impact of the virus itself softens, the impact on how people behave might change. Even post a vaccine, people might think about personal space a little bit differently and might change their behavior around going to the office or going to the retail centers, and that they might change that as well. And that's the big unknown for me. And I believe from a developer perspective, until there's a little bit more clarity around what that would look like, it would be very, very difficult to embark on new projects. Also, if you think in terms of just timelines, we're not talking about waiting here for 2 years. We're sort of saying, listen, we're sort of end of July, we're beginning of August. We'll probably have to wait just until after December and January when people come back. I think that would be a good time to sort of reevaluate new projects and look at embarking on new projects.
Okay, perfect. And maybe just before we go to Dennis, maybe just on that point, and it's something that I asked Ben, from a financing perspective, will this also move you, or are you open to, from a financing perspective, looking to more emerging asset classes, something like student housing, affordable housing, where the dynamics from a financing perspective are a lot different? Is this also going to create more of a shift, or an accelerated shift, or were you looking at those asset classes as it were pre the pandemic?
No, we definitely open to new asset classes. And if you think about an asset class, asset is just something that has got some ability to generate a cash flow. And ultimately, that's what we evaluate in determining our lending appetite. So new asset classes with interesting cash flows, and cash flows that can be reliably predicted is something certainly we would look at. The interesting thing, we mentioned data centers. The interesting thing about a data center is it's not really a real estate asset or a property asset. It is more a technology asset, because if you look at what does the building cost versus what does the sort of information technology cost and the hardware cost that you put inside it, I think the asset is probably 15 or 20%, or the property side of it is probably 15 or 20% of the total cost. And on a data center, you don't typically deal with property fundamentals like where is it situated, what is the access to that asset, if it's retail, or where is it situated if it's office. A data center can operate anywhere, no matter where it is. So it's an interesting type of property, but it's not really a property in the sense of property fundamentals, and it's not really a property in the sense of what constitutes its value. It's the IT infrastructure that's valuable there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Dennis, coming to you. I mean, obviously IFC Edge, has been on a Pan-African strategy. You've got, certified buildings in, both in, whether it's Ghana, whether it's Kenya, etc. I mean, how have you seen that do you believe that the pandemic is going to drive further adoption to edge and green building technology across the sector? I mean, how's the discussions been in terms of, during and post, or during while we're still going through it, how's the discussions evolved with developers, investors seeking to, get edge certification for their buildings? Has there been any change? And how do you see the adoption of edge and green technologies being either accelerated or continuing on its trajectory, going forward?
Okay, so what we've seen is that we still have constrained resources, not just environmental, but also within the financial industry. We are also seeing constraints in energy and water usage. And building green increases resilience to all of these shocks, as well as provides affordability by reducing operating costs. So this is necessary for both affordable housing and the student housing, as we've seen around. Currently, we have about 86,000 homes that have been EDGE certified globally, and most of them are within the low to middle income markets. And then we also have student residential projects that have been registered, that have been certified in Africa. Nigeria, Kenya, we have in South Africa. A good example is Acorn, who just were able to raise a green bond of about $40 million to help finance their EDGE certified student housing. Here, I mean, in Kenya, we also have seen so much interest where the government has even issued a decree to mandate green social housing for its people, and that's very popular Big Four agenda. And we are also seeing developers whose affordable housing project meets the EDGE standards. I mean, getting free land to do these kind of projects. So overall, we think that it's also worth noting to make the point that a few hospitals, even in Ghana, the first COVID-19 hospital that was built to treat COVID-19 patients was certified with EDGE. So governments are seeing the need to make sure that if we have to do anything new from now onwards, it has to be something that is green and then efficient.
Great, thank you. And maybe just to stick on that point, I mean, do you foresee, in terms of the future growth from an EDGE perspective, do you see that coming from, once again, from traditional asset classes, or for more deals like was done with Acorn on their student housing developments? Do you see more, more growth in affordable housing, student accommodation development from a certification perspective, or will it still be majority from the retail, commercial offices, and industrial and logistics sectors?
So we think a lot of it is going to come from affordable housing and then student accommodation. Although we don't rule out the fact that we'll still have some commercial coming in. But looking at the trend, it's looking very interesting for affordable housing, because, I mean, if you take the whole EDGE program into perspective, it kind of gives opportunity for all sectors of the housing industry to be able to get their project certified, be it low income or high end. You are able to use the EDGE program to actually get your project certified. You are also able to use it for all the other asset classes, hospitals, education, and all that. And what we've also seen, which I mentioned in my last statement, is the hospitals. Because currently in Ghana, we have 2 hospitals that have been EDGE certified. There is one other hospital that was certified using a different certification system. And we are seeing that in other parts of Africa as well. So these asset classes are places that we think would really improve when it comes to student accommodation, we look at affordable housing, and then we look at hospitals. These are three areas that we are seeing a very big group in when it comes to certification at this time.
Perfect. Thank you, Dennis. Ben, maybe just to segue from that, in terms of from a tenant perspective, where do you foresee obviously there's going to be the idea that there'll be more appetite for flexible lease terms. Gerard mentioned in the other session around turnover rentals, and so did you. I mean, how much is, let's say, EDGE certification technologies now in terms of whether it's social distancing or monitoring within offices, how important are these technologies and certifications going to be going forward in terms of, in terms of what is going to be a hard tenant market you would perceive for the next 12 to 18 months? So I think the one question is, how important will it be to differentiate your real estate product by having certifications, the right technologies, etc. And yeah, how is the tenants? Do you think the tenants are going to become a lot? Their demand or what they're demanding is going to change significantly?
Well, I think what the tenants will be looking for, obviously, are two things really. One is the finances of the occupation of the space, and the other is how they will be occupying it in a different way. And I think from the former point of view, this is being exacerbated by COVID-19. And the latter, I think, was happening in any case. I mean, there was a lot of smarter working going on, particularly in the office sector. And this relates more to how people use office space in terms of flexibility, in terms of working from home. But I mean, to that, obviously, you'll be looking at it from a health and safety perspective as well. And so, landlords are definitely going to have to think about how the building is used physically by tenants, but also how tenants will want to use it in terms of reducing the amount of space that they want, having staff working from home, hot desking, and being much cleverer about how they use that space. So, I was talking in my presentation, my pre-recorded presentation, about a tenant that we're consulting for who is consolidating their office occupation from 4 buildings down to 1. And they initially thought they needed around 400,000 square feet. And when they actually went through it, implementing their new global strategy of how they use office space, that requirement dropped from 400,000 square feet down to 250,000 square feet. So that's almost down to 50%. And that was because of, as I say, desk sharing, hot desking, working from home practices, and so on and so forth. And so that was all happening before COVID anyway. I mean, if you were to put a layer of, additional working from home from that, then yeah, I mean, it might drop to 200,000 square feet. Talking to colleagues based in the UK, some of them are saying, I'm only going to go to work 3 days every 2 weeks. And, setting up a home office, these are some significant changes that we're going to be looking at going into the future. Like I've said, though, I don't see this to be a precursor of a collapse in the office market. I think these offices will simply be used differently. And Nairobi, if we're going to focus on Nairobi being a regional hub, demand is still there. It'll perhaps, the market will change, and the developers will have to adapt accordingly, and we'll see that change. In terms of, you mentioned turnover rentals. Yeah, I mean, that's not a fix-all solution. Obviously, as Gerhard was saying earlier, developers and financiers want some form of certainty in the income they're going to get. They don't get that from turnover rentals, and so it's not a fix-all situation. Tenant concessions are very short-term. We discussed this morning. You can't give tenants 50% concessions on rent ad infinitum. It has to be for a short period. So we're looking for answers. We're looking for negotiation between landlords and tenants, between landlords and their financiers, to create a financial agreement, financial terms that will see them out of the short term in terms of the pandemic itself and the longer term impacts of the economic recession that will come as a result of that.
Thank you. Yeah, so very good points. I think we are running out of time, but Gerard, maybe I'll just come to final question from your viewpoint, just touching on the things that we've discussed here and also going forward. Yeah, I think once again from a financial perspective, in terms of providing finances to the different developments. I mean, what are your how are you building in like an IFC Edge type of certification into the way you view a building, or new technologies that are going to have to, if a building is smart, if a building is IFC Edge certified, how does that change the way in which you are, valuing how you're putting forward the financing, etc. And what changes? And do you see that more and more tenant demand is going to drive more and more developers to do that?
Yeah. So obviously, we are very aware of the need for greener buildings and being responsible towards the environment. And we, in our dealings with our clients, we also make that very clear. But to a large extent, obviously, the design of these buildings and how they operate with potential savings by being designed better is very much sort of driven firstly by our clients, although we do influence the way they think about that. And I do think everybody operating in this space, it's important to all of us that we are sensible about creating greener buildings. I think the last point that I also want to make is, as much we spoke about turnover rentals and we spoke about lots of change. I think as much as things are changing, it's up to all of us operating in this sector, whether it's financiers, developers, tenants, property managers, agents, to reinvent the way we're doing things. And as much as I've said earlier, turnover rate is going to be a problem. I think if it might be a problem in terms of how we thought about it 8 months ago, but the challenge is now, how do we get our heads around that? Because that's maybe the way that things are going to be. And as financiers, we still need to play a role in this sector going forward, and hence we need to find a way that we will be able to digest it and structure financing solutions around that type of structures.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. So I think we've taken some great points here. As mentioned earlier, the media will also be in touch via African Laughter and via Murray to set up one-on-one interviews. I believe a couple have already been set up. Thank you. I know that you've been involved in a number of sessions today, so thanks for that. And yeah, that we'll conclude with that, and we'll move on to our afternoon sessions. So thank you very much. And yeah,
thanks.
Perfect. Thank you,
and apologies again for being late, for signing in late.
No worries.
Okay, cheers. Bye.
Okay, bye.